Those who have walked out on first dates, what was your I'm outta here moment? Legitimately, when she said she needed to take a wee as we walked down a back alley next to the bar. She pulled her jeans down, took a poop behind a bin, then searched in the bin and wiped with a sheet of newspaper. I was totally infatuated with her after working with her for a few months, and in 30 seconds, it completely disappeared. Fast. Went to meet a guy for the first time at his house. There was a pile of toenail clippings on his coffee table, and it wasn't one recent clipping. It was like many clippings. I quickly left. She had 22 cats and would just randomly take in strays, not give them any vet care, and was planning on keeping a recent litter. I love cats. I paid the bartender when she went to the bathroom and hyper walked to the door. I forwarded her contact info and a summary of what she told me to the Humane Society. This guy and I were eating dinner after chatting for a couple of weeks, and unprompted, in the middle of something I was saying, and completely unrelated to what was being discussed, he said something along the lines of, "So you know in order for this to work you're gonna have to share yourself, right? My friends and I like to pass girls around." I was pretty dumbfounded, and after a bit of stuttering, I told him I didn't think it was gonna work. I asked for a to-go box and my portion of the check and noped out of there. I had a first date with a girl who insisted we go to a really expensive place, where she ordered a $25 appetizer, $45 steak, and a $15 drink. She also wouldn't put her phone down, kept taking calls and answering texts. The waitress noticed and motioned for me from behind her. I excused myself, and the waitress had made separate bills and asked if I wanted to pay my share and leave hers at the table. I said that would be wonderful, so I did. He invited me and a friend to play dodgeball with a group of folks I've never met. We're having an okay time, but he's paying more attention to his friends. But that's fine because I've got my friend to keep me occupied. We're hanging out in the parking lot before the first game is about to start when out of nowhere he grabs a ball and throws it at my crotch as hard as he can. This dude screams, "Wham bam, right in the clam." I immediately turn to my friend and ask her if she's ready to leave. I say goodbye to him and his friends, immediately come home to a gripe of texts about how immature I was behaving. I was on a first date with a military guy. He spent a large portion of the date talking about why the strippers in Toronto were better than the strippers where we lived. To change the topic, I asked him if he did any volunteer work with military overseas. And he said, "No, I joined the military to kill people, not help people." I got my bill, chugged my beer, and left as fast as I could. The fact that within 10 minutes of meeting him, he started making sexual comments and joking about following me home so he could stalk me if I rejected him. I got out with the help of a bartender who let me leave out the back door. Not me, but this happened to a friend. For context, this friend has a beard. So my friend picks up this girl and they're on their way to dinner. And she says, "You do realize that if this is gonna work, you have to shave that off, right?" He didn't say anything, just turned around and dropped her back off at her house. This is meeting someone from an online dating app. He turns up with pupils the size of dinner plates and super erratic. He said he'd forgotten his wallet, so I got the first round. We were on our way to the second pub to meet his friends so they could lend him some money. For the walk there, he spoke absolute garbage and nonsense nonstop, but ended with how he tried to drown his ex's chihuahuas in a pool. Near the pub, he said he had to answer whoever was calling him on the phone. At this point, we were 30 minutes into the date and already going to the next pub. He downed his drink in about 3 seconds. Whilst he stood there on the phone, I said I'd meet him at the pub. Everything was in close proximity. But instead, I walked past it and ran all the way home. 1 p.m. lunch date and she was drunk as a skunk. She invited me back to her place where she said her 2-year-old son wouldn't even notice. I noped out and called her a cab home. I still feel bad for the son years later. She finally let it slip that she had a boyfriend, but it was totally fine because things have been going bad for a long time and I'm gonna break up with him anyway. My thoughts were that if she would do that to him, she'd do it to me. No thanks. We had great chats online and decided to meet in person. He's got a Bluetooth headset on with a little LED light that shows it's on. He keeps it on during drinks. I work up the nerve to ask if he can take off the headset while we're eating dinner. With pride and complete confidence, he says, "Don't worry, you'll have my full attention. This isn't a phone headset, it's a camera." invited me to a bar which was apparently close to his apartment, and kept wanting to snuggle at his apartment with me. I left to a friend's party and met the man I'd been with for 3+ years. The first guy later texted me explicit photos on Easter Sunday. She brought her pet rat with her that was hanging out in her bra and kept feeding it french fries. She casually mentioned she had warrants, so I just faked an emergency and bailed. He started making inappropriate comments, then took me to his house to use the bathroom before the next part of our date. We had lunch first, then we were supposed to play mini golf. I didn't know he lived with his parents, so I had to meet them on the first date. They were nice, but I felt so uncomfortable because I already knew this wasn't going to move beyond date number 1 thanks to his remarks. He told me to wait in his room while he went to the bathroom, and I noticed that his computer was on. Before our date, he was chatting with a friend and left it up on the screen. The last message he'd sent said, "I hope I get to see her boobs. I bet they're so perky and small." What? Why leave that up and send me in there to see it? I lied, saying that my mom called with an emergency and needed me back home. Noped out of there and never spoke to him again. I had to pick him up and he complained about everything. My car, the way I drove, my music taste, why was I being so quiet whilst carefully plotting my escape plan? But it was definitely the moment he said, "My friends really want to meet you. I need them to know you're real." And that's when I bounced. He was 45 minutes late picking me up. Weather was quite poor, so I gave him a pass. We get to the coffee shop, I take off my jacket, and immediately he says, "Oh, I see you brought your A game. Or should I say D game?" referring to my breasts. I'm surprisingly busty for my frame. Even the people 2 tables over just stopped and looked at him. I had invited a guy off a dating site to my house. When I opened the door, he said he could kill me if he wanted and to never meet anyone off the internet again. My 2 male roommates were in the kitchen because they knew this guy was coming and heard him. They ran him out of the house pretty damn quick. We started by chatting online. At the time, I was a smoker and told him. He said no big deal because he smokes too. We decided to meet up at Starbucks for coffee. First thing he said, "Hi, by the way, when I said I smoke, I was talking about meth." I said, "Oh, bye," and turned around and left. The guy wanted to meet at a place where I used to work at. I showed up and he was already there. I ordered vodka and we're glaring into the menu while his shots arrive and he's just pounding them back. The base bartender is giving the stink eye. I know him, so I'm like, WTF. The date steps out for the bathroom or to vape or something, and the bartender beelines to my table to warn me that this guy is a raging alcoholic that messed around with his cousin a few months back. I noped right out of there. I had a first date with a girl who told me, "Actually, I'm engaged, but I'm not 100% sure if he's the right one. So I'm just gonna go on a few dates to see if I change my mind." Check please. He invited me inside while he finished getting ready. No biggie. Once inside, he insisted that I let him show me his dungeon. Dude's apartment was pretty empty, minus a TV and couch, but his bedroom was kitted out. He then wanted the now uncomfortable me to see if the shackles on his bed fit me. Thankfully, I had set up for a friend to call me within the first 30 minutes of the date, and I faked an emergency. We were having the usual get-to-know-you conversation over drinks. I was telling her about how my car was stolen the night before, and her response was, "Don't you just hate blacks?" I never said who stole it. I was out of there. I hadn't even met the guy yet. We were still chatting online to set up the first date. We were going to be busy at different times that weekend, but I was interested and sincerely offered to meet a week later instead. He proceeded to get drunk by himself and sent a ton of sad messages about how he couldn't get a date and he was unattractive and I was totally gonna bail on him. Which wasn't the plan before, but it certainly was now. I have a few. Number 1, he told me I wasn't pretty enough to be so confident. Like, what? I was shocked, but the server came to my rescue and was like, "Girl, get out of here. No charge for your drink." Number 2, he told me that people looking at his sleeve tat without permission was the equivalent of women being assaulted for wearing skirts. What? Number 3, I sat down across from him and within 5 minutes of meeting me, he tried to slide his hand up my dress under the table. Yikes. Number 4, he told me he had too many back issues of The Economist to read, so he couldn't read anything I might suggest ever. And number 5, he told me his fiancée of 9 years had dumped him the week before. We were back at her place. She pulled out a giant glass jar that was full of what I thought was moonshine. She proceeded to explain to me that it was 100% GHB and that her kink is to be drugged with it before sex. She went into the bathroom and I got the hell out of there so fast that my imprint on the couch probably wasn't gone by the time I was driving. He was a friend of a friend. We went to a restaurant and ordered our food. While we waited, he started to say things like, "I'll eat this meal first, then I'll eat you out." I laughed because I thought he's just joking. I thought he's just nervous and his mouth lost his filter. Then when the waitress later asked if we want more to drink, he was like, "Yes, bring us something strong." I said, "Not for me, and that I have to drive later and just want a Coke." And he looked at me and was like, "Don't be stupid. You think we'll just do it once and I'll let you leave? You'll at least stay the night." The waitress looked at me with wide eyes like I'm crazy for even being there. After she left, I told him that he has to stop with this, that it was rude and that we're on our first date. He apologized and for 10 minutes it was okay. Then, as if a switch was turned on, he said just like that, mid-sentence, without even ending his previous story, "You know what, I can't control myself anymore. Either we go now or I'll screw you on this table." I told him I have to go to the bathroom. He complained like a baby that we have to go now. I went away anyway and went to the waitress, paid for the food, and left without a word. She wouldn't stop making fun of me. She was 26 and I was 36. Though if it matters, we were at the same place in our careers and income. She kept making jokes about my age, about how old and decrepit I was. Eventually, after telling her pretty directly to lay off, I just said, "You know, I'm not enjoying this. I'm gonna go," and paid for the table and left. Later, she said it was because she was overcompensating because she was self-conscious about how much younger she was. But that just means that when she's uncomfortable, she goes straight to demeaning the other person. It only happened once. She kept talking about her ex. I asked if she wanted to get back with him. She said, "I don't know," and showed me a picture of him. I couldn't leave fast enough. I drove us. I started to parallel park. I had been working in parking in San Francisco for years by then, and he said, "I'll park this for you. Women don't do well at parallel parking." At dinner, he was dismissive only to female waitstaff. I ran into these two hilariously drunk surfer dudes on my way from the bathroom, and they told me my date was a jerk. We laughed about it, and I went back to my table. When leaving, the drunk dudes were also outside. I said bye to them, and Jerkface had the nerve to bark, "She's with me." I told him to wait while I got in the car and unlocked the doors. Except I didn't. I drove off and left him standing there. The two drunk dudes whooped and yelled, "Go, lady, go!" Such an awesome finish to a terribly embarrassing date. It seemed to be going all right for a while. We meet late afternoon and went for a stroll around town, doing a bit of a pub crawl with a drink at each, followed by some food at a monthly food truck festival I knew about, which was going to be followed by a local bar and dancing. I kept seeing the same guy at all the locations, obviously following us. On a toilet break, I mentioned something to one of the pub doormen, who asked him to leave politely, although that got a little heated. She ran over to the doorman and explained that it was her husband. They had a thing of watching each other go out with someone and maybe watching them have sex. I did drop in a question if they had ever done more, like stealing from someone, and she accidentally said that it happened, but only a couple of times, before trying to say that she didn't mean it. I left them with the doormen and reported them to the police. I go to a bar and meet this cute girl and we get along pretty fine. She invites me back to her place, but it turns out that she was with her friends at the bar and they were just giving her some space for us to talk. They were all drunk, and her friend was insisting on driving home, so her friend, agreed to let me drive them home, because the friend was very set on not leaving her truck parked outside a bar overnight. We get all the way to their apartment complex, and then getting into the parking spot was tricky. So the drunk friend/truck owner insisted on parking, and pulled the "I legally own this vehicle" card. I was some guy her friend met at a bar, so I was like, "Okay then." Within 5 seconds, she backs the truck into a drainage ditch and gets it stuck. We all have to push the truck and get covered in mud. While we're doing that, the girl I met at the bar had lost her wallet. So I dug through the mud water ditch at like 4 a.m. and didn't find her wallet. We get back to her place and the mood is definitely ruined. So we end up eating a random cheese and meat platter from Safeway on her kitchen floor at like 4 a.m. I sleep on the couch and wake up early and I think, well, she was great. It was just the whole truck thing that ruined it. I look for a pen and paper to write down my number before leaving. All I can find is a piece of paper taped to the inside of the door. It was a court date for a domestic violence/abuse hearing. I just left and chalked it up as a strange night. When he asked me to change my clothes because they weren't sexy enough and told me what I had to order for food, he ended the date by talking about his gun collection. Blind date set up by my grandparents. I love my granddad, and he's done so much for me, so I went. We met at a bar where my best friend worked. We get drinks and I'm talking to my friend. My date says, "This homo trying to hook up with you?" 1, he's not gay. 2, it wouldn't matter if he was. 3, he was just checking in on me. So I'm already done with him at this point, but my ride is still over an hour away. His mate shows up at one point and starts trying to flirt with me. It was gross. My date then starts asking about my hot friends and if I can get them to come out. I said, I like my friends, so no. He starts being racist against Pacific Islanders and was horribly rude to this German guy there drinking. When my ride gets there, I said, I'm leaving. He says, I got a big one for you. You should come home with me. I said, thanks, but I'd rather gouge out my eyes. The next day, he messaged me and said, you probably think I'm a bit of a jerk after last night, but do you want to go out again? I had no intentions of ever seeing him again. So I explained why his behavior was unacceptable and suggested he try making friends who are girls so he sees them as something other than a hole to stick his prick in. I told my grandparents everything. They told his parents, and apparently his dad was super embarrassed. My grandparents were then informed to stay out of my love life. And anytime they brought it up, I just say, I got a big one for you. You should come home with me. I work in fine dining. A friend of mine showed up to my restaurant on a first date with a guy who arrived drunk as a skunk. She's an absolutely beautiful, hilarious woman with a great career. Truly a catch. Friday night, full restaurant. There are tables in the middle of the floor where everyone could see. He continued to burn through 3 bottles of wine, started making some bad jokes about her looking loose. She suggested he stop drinking. He reached across the table and slapped her. We all ushered her out, and a bunch of men at the other tables were about to beat his butt, but we held them back until he paid his bill. He didn't have enough money and said he was planning on making her split the $300 tab with him. We called the cops. Bye, Patrick. Another time, I helped a woman sneak out the back of our restaurant after eavesdropping on her horrible date. Their table was right by the service station. He'd spent the entirety of the date complaining about his ex-girlfriend's eating disorder. From the moment they sat down and ordered drinks. Oh wow, you're having wine? That's so refreshing. My ex was anorexic. She had to count calories of everything. And the dude just never stopped. The woman dipped out in between the first and second course. He did a racist impression of his Asian professor while we were having dinner in a Vietnamese restaurant. He picked me up and drove though, so I couldn't leave on the spot. When we got in his car after dinner, he asked if I wanted to go back to his place. I made up an excuse as to why I couldn't. He made 2 calls on Bluetooth to hang out with other people while I was still in the car. It wasn't even while driving back. The car was still in park. All of this happened in about 10 minutes. I got to the bar after him. He had a glass of water on the table and slid it to me after I sat down. I said it's okay, he could have it, and I would wait to get my own. He scoffed and told me I don't know anything about being roofied, and I do. At 3 minutes in, he asked me if he could add me on Facebook so that he could touch himself to my photos. He told me I should stop going to the gym because he could barely get me as is, and if I lost weight, I'd be too hot and he'd have no chance. He then tried to get me to go back to his place, and I declined. He offered to let me sleep on his couch to make the idea more appealing. He then bragged about how much money he had, asked me how short I was on rent, saying he'd give me the money right now. I was not short on rent and never said I was. Told me he could afford an UberX but would buy me an Uber pool home because he didn't know me that well. Lastly, he asked me not to BS him and be honest. Would I go on a second date with him? I said no. He stood up and screamed at me in the bar about how I'm the most shallow person he'd ever met, and that the only possible reason I would say no is because he's not good looking enough for me. He stared at my chest the entire time and told me he was in love with me. We had known each other 3 days. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.